Hi, Steve and Caleb with Brownells here with another edition of Smyth Busters. Today we're going to look at the question, is a lighter trigger always better?
Lighter triggers are always better.
No, they're not.
They're not.
And
no.
there's a good reason for that.
Absolutely there is.
But first, tell me what's so great about a light trigger?
So the light trigger itself is going to give you the most accuracy, or give you the most potential accuracy out of your firearm because you're going to be more steady when you're pulling that trigger. Because a lot of times shots are thrown due to the trigger pull itself, and a lighter trigger is going to help eliminate that. But it's not always the best for all scenarios. For example, take a service gun. Why would a lighter trigger not be good on a service gun?
You don't want that round going down range before you intend it to.
That's exactly right.
If you've got adrenaline pumping, if you've got a numb finger from cold, if you're injured or something, it's too easy to pull a trigger on a light gun.
Yeah, and not just service guns as well. There's a limit whenever you get into your hunting rifles also.
Sure.
Typically, most gunsmiths, when they do a trigger job on your hunting rifle, they won't go, like the minimum most of them will go is about 2.5 pounds.
Right, unless it's like a prairie dog gun.
Right.
Where you're set up at a bench, you're camping out basically. And
there are some exceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for a deer gun or an elk gun, no, especially if you're hunting in cold weather, you don't want it too light.
Absolutely, yeah. I can't tell you, and also I can't tell you how many times someone will call in on the tech line looking for the lightest trigger for their AR-15. And they'll want something similar to what's on this bench rest gun here, and that's just not going to happen.
Right.
And there's good reason for it. For example, my service setup AR-15, that has a tricked out trigger in it. It's the Elfman service trigger, but it's not below 4 pounds. It's going to stay at 4 pounds for that reason. And just because the trigger's heavier doesn't mean it's necessarily worse. You can have a heavy trigger that's a nice and crisp pull, and it's going to feel lighter than it actually is because of that.
Right. Like on a 1911, I prefer a 4.5 pound crisp trigger, and that's just right for me. I can feel it even when I'm wearing a glove.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to triggers, I think another good point is practice makes perfect.
Right.
Know your trigger. You practice with that trigger, you're always going to shoot better with it.
Right. And a range trigger can be different than a field trigger. So if you're going to go out in the field and actually actively be walking around hunting something, a little on the heavier side is called for. At the range, with a play toy, you can get away with just about anything. Yeah,
and then you get into the single stage and 2-stage triggers. Whereas, for example, I'll just use AR-15s as an example, that Elfman I mentioned earlier. That's a single stage trigger at 4 pounds. And then you have your Geisleys, which are 2-stage triggers, so the first and second stage have 2 different weights. So they're really safe triggers, and they feel a little bit lighter than they are. But the 2-stage trigger, again, isn't for everyone. It's something that comes down to personal preference.
Sure. And if you have 2 firearms that are approximately the same, but one's got a lighter trigger, well, when you switch from the heavy to the light, that first round down range is not going to be dead center, I'll bet you.
Yeah.
It usually goes off before you intend to. So if you got a row of 1911s you're shooting and one has a 2.5 pound trigger and the other one has a 5 pound trigger, guess what? You got to relearn that trigger.
Yep, that's exactly it. And it's basically all about being used to your firearm. And if you're picking up an unfamiliar firearm that you know has had some trigger work done to it, take a few dry fires first.
Right.
Familiarize yourself and then shoot it.
So the myth that a lighter trigger is always better is just that, a myth. It's all going to depend on what the gun's going to be used for in your situation and your needs. With that in mind, if you have any comments, pro or con light triggers, let us know what your experiences have been. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time with another edition of Smyth Busters.